Okay, so Gavin and I had the sweat with Gavin of going to the Smolovitz's for lunch today. And thanks again, Gavin. And Ian gave an interesting idea today. So I'm quoting Ian, and Gavin, correct me if I miss one or two facts or points. So, as mentioned a few shiurim ago, Moshe davened 515 times, but Hashem didn't allow him to go into the land. And what he did was he told the people, the children of Israel, the Jewish people, he told him on various occasions that he's praying and Hashem's not allowing him to go into the land. And it almost fell on deaf ears. It actually did fall on deaf ears, because what he was trying to say, ask them in an indirect way to pray for him, that they would, through their prayers, he would go into the land. But they didn't get it. And what Ian was alluding to is that sometimes we hear voices, we listen to conversations, but we're not connected, and we don't get the message. And sometimes it's for someone's benefit, and we don't get it, and we don't help them because we're not tuned in, so to speak. So in life, I know it's easier said than done to try and be sensitive to people's needs and try and assist them with what they need, with our prayers or however way we can assist them.
I think that's a good point, Matt. Right. Very good point. Yeah, so it's actually something I never thought about with people davening for Moshe. Wow. Okay.
I'd never actually heard it. I'd never heard that before. I thought it was actually thank you, Kevin, for bringing it up again. It was kind of interesting. I'd never heard that that Moshe asked the people to daven for him, and they didn't.
Well, no, he said he's davened and it's not working on Hashem, and he said it on a few occasions, and they didn't get the message that maybe through their prayers it would have changed.
Ian's source, because never in my nearly 50 years have I heard that, and I've heard a lot of droshes. So I'd actually like Ian's source to see where such a thing actually took place. I'd like to hear a sourcing with respect, because never heard a concept, not from Rabbi Ranko, not from Simcha Steinhauer, not from Rabbi Katz, not from David Gott.
I'll check with. I'll ask my role, all right, and then just because I also never heard it, but I genuinely trust Ian. Ian's very reliable.
Yeah.
So because he normally takes it. He doesn't actually listen to Shurim, so he normally takes it directly from the source. But I'll double check with Rabbi Albach.
I'm not questioning Ian's legitimacy. What I'm saying is, whenever you give a share, you have to give the source always.
Yeah. So, but I'm saying he normally does have one. But I will check with Rabbi Albach. I don't think he wouldn't intentionally, but he could have made a mistake. So we have to check.
No, I'm not saying it might have been a certain opinion, but the general consensus is this was a private matter between Hashem and Moshe, and
yeah, that's the way I've always heard it as well. I agree with you, but I'm not here to question. I thought it was interesting, and I'll check with Rabbi Albach.
But either way, the point of it is, I think even if Kevin brings, and the other one is unsubstantiated by general opinion, then it might have a lone source. I think Kevin's giving over the fact that sometimes we listen to people's troubles. We don't think about them enough to pray for them, and for actually to have a lot of compassion. Kevin, good. All right, let's get into the
absolutely, it's a valid point, regardless, yeah.
So we were going backwards and forwards, and why, if the Kohanim happens to be the thief in this case that robbed a convert who died without heirs, that is able to prosecute to get back the principal, and the Kohen feels bad, and he wants to bring a ram asham offering as well as pay the principal of the Kabb that he took from the convert. Obviously the asham for the false testimony when it came to court, and the principal back, because he's got nobody to give it to, logically connected to the convert. So he gives it to Hashem through the Kohanim. So we gave backwards and forwards a discussion as to, as you know, as to what his reasons are, what the Gemara's reasons were, etc., etc. So I'm not going to repeat history. Whatever we did, we did. So I'm just going through the new aspects, which is in 109b3. The Gemara asks, but it's written, and a man's holy shall be his own. When it says a man's holy shall be his own, obviously when it refers to the Kohanim, and this is in Bad Midbar, chapter 5, verse 10, which is Numbers, Bar Midbar, that's a tongue twister, that one. A man's holy shall be his own. When it's a Kohen, he brings his own offerings. So obviously it teaches that if it's an Israelite, he has to give the animal which he wishes to sacrifice to the Kohanim. But if it's a Kohen, a man's holy shall be his own. It means the Kohen has a right, an exclusive right, to make his own offerings and keep the Kohanim's portion of it, the meat and the hearts, because he's a Kohen, and even if it's not his mishmar on duty, he's certainly entitled to keep it. We did allude earlier on to where it was by ill-gotten gains, even if legally he has a right to it, but he can't be sued, and the only reason he doesn't give it back is there's nobody to sue him. That doesn't mean it's moral, which, according to certain opinions, means that if he brings an animal that he purchased, yes, he can get the meat and the hearts, but not if he is bringing the money back, the animal back, because it's something he robbed from somebody else, like a convert, who has no heirs to be able to sue the Kohen to retract back the animal that he stole. So that was through illicit means, or certainly immoral means. And according to that, if you read, in a man's holy shall be his own, that's excluded that he should benefit. He might partake along with the other Kohanim of the Mishmar, should it be his Mishmar. But if it's not, it's a question. But anyway, we still have to address the point, according to a different opinion, which says it's legally his. And we did go backwards and forwards on different answers last week. But now we're dealing with some more answers. And since the Kohen who robbed a convert can take his asham for himself, which is the ram for his false oath, he should also be entitled to keep the robbed property for himself. That's the suggestion, because we learned that restitution is awarded to the Kohen who receives the asham offering. Ordinarily, all the Kohanim of the Mishmar have equal rights to the asham. And we said of the Mishmar, not just the base of for that day, because it's not part of the daily offerings. It's talking about for theft, because it's such an unusual event. All the mishmar for that we can get benefit, and the monetary restitution of whatever's brought back in terms of a principal is shared between them. But here, if it's a Kohen, saying initially that where the Kohen was the robber, he has exclusive right to his own offering, so let him keep the restitution as well, meaning the principal. It's a difficult thing to understand, but it's saying you still need to answer by Midbar, chapter 5, verse 10. And a man's holy shall be his own. So the Gemara says, okay, so what are we dealing with here? We touched on this on Thursday. Saying, Bryce, what the heck, huh?
Torah.com, not somewhere else.com. Okay.
Exactly. Okay, so guys, what we learn is the Gemara suggesting that perhaps this Kohen must make restitution to all of the Kohanim of his Mishmar, because he's in a state of impurity, which we mentioned on Thursday, and therefore he's unfit to bring his own offering. Okay, because since he's unable to offer the asham in the state of being tameh, he must give it to the members of his mishmar, and therefore if he can't if he can't retain benefits of both the meat and the hide, for the Ashim offering, he has no right to keep the restitution of the principal about that he stole, the actual amount that he stole, or the value. In other words, he stole a cow. He can't keep that either. So the Gemara counters that argument and says, no. If you read the wording of the Bryce, it's dealing with a Kohen who is pure. Why? Because if the Kohen was Tameh, it wouldn't use this term, rob property of convert, as something in which he has a share. In other words, why would he share in other words, when he robbed from the Kohen and he made a false oath, he's then coming to give it to the Kohanim of his Mishmar to make atonement because the convert is dead. And therefore he has, if it's his Mishmar on duty for that week, and that's the case in our Brisa, it says something for which he has a share, which implies that he has a share as well as all the Kohanim in his Mishmar serving that week. So he's saying it can't be that the Kohen is in a state of impurity, because how can he have a share in such a property? Why? Very simply, in Zavachim 98b, it says that only pure members of the Mishmar that are in a state of purity receive portions of the temple offering. In other words, if a Kohen is Tameh impure, he cannot sacrifice the animal, neither does he receive a share of the meat or hides. If you're not going to be part of the service, you're not going to derive the benefits accordingly. So therefore, he has to be in a state of purity in order to have a share with the other Kohanim of his Mishmar. So the Gemara concedes and said that's a valid point. So it obviously refers to a Kohen who is a Tahor. So we have eliminated that as an argument, and it presents another question. It says, rather, we derive it through the Gezerah Shava of La Kohen from the passage dealing with the consecrated ancestral field, that the Kohen himself may not keep even property that is already in his possession. So we did touch on this on Thursday very quickly. I raced through the concept. Is that when you're dealing with robbed property from a convert, it states if you want to make it to Shuvah, the return debt is for Hashem, for the Kohen, meaning Hashem doesn't eat the meat, the Kohen eat the meat after they've sacrificed the pleasing aroma to Hashem from the animal. And there's a passage dealing with the disposition of an Israelite ancestral field that he had consecrated. I'm going to explain what this means. Vayikra, Leviticus chapter 27, verse 21, to the Kohen. So it mentions this word to the Kohen, for the Kohen twice. It's a Gezerah Shava. Okay, so when we see this repeated, it's coming to teach us a certain lesson. So it says, to the Kohen shall be his ancestral heritage. So just as in regard to the ancestral field, the law is that if a Kohen gains possession, he may not keep it, but he's got to relinquish it to the members of his Mishmar. So that too, in regard to the robbed property of a convert, even if the Kohen has a legal possession of it, he must relinquish it to the other members of his Mishmar if he wants to do it to Shuvah. Why? Because the verse, and the man's holy shall be his own. We've got to interpret it as referring to holies other than robbed property of the deceased convert, which means only if the Kohen bought the animal legitimately, and there's no question in terms of the morality of it, does he get to keep the hide and the meat if he sacrifices it. Otherwise, he's got to obviously share it with the Kohanim of his Mishmar if they're on duty and he's on duty for that week. Now, there's another issue that we're going to deal with, because it taught in the Brisa, for what purpose does the Torah state his ancestral heritage? So what's this thing of ancestral heritage?
Yeah.
So in Leviticus Vayikra chapter 27, and we're dealing with verse 16 to 21. You've got an Israelite here. Guy's a normal Jew, right? So he consecrates his ancestral field. And when we use the term ancestral field, we mean that he got it, left him in a will. And what he does is he puts it as collateral to the temple and says, I'm going to redeem it by either giving you money or you can keep the property. And eventually he says, oh, it's okay, there's no extra money, you can keep the property. And the temple treasurer sells it to someone else, because unless he redeems it back. So he puts it down as a deposit or a gesture of goodwill, as you can see. But he loses it if he doesn't pay what he promised to pay. And he can't be upset about it because he did it voluntarily. So the temple treasurer then sells it to someone else. Why? Because they need to generate the revenue of the sold property for the temple. But then we did say that when the Yovel year, the Jubilee year, arrives, the field leaves the purchaser's possession and is given to the Kohanim. Now, guys, remember I used this example on Tuesday, and on Thursday, and I said, look, you buy a property of 2 million rand, and you've got 49 years before the Yovel year. So if you take 3,400 rand times 12 months times 49 years, you get 2 million rand. So what happens is you take off 3,400 rand every month for what is deducted from the 49 years. So easier way to do it is to know you've got 5 years back and you've got 60 months, which is 5 years. So basically 3,400 rand times 60 months is 204,000 rand. Okay, so that's basically what you're paying for it. It's what you can call a rental agreement more than an ownership. You own it for that period until it's up. So you can consider it almost like you're paying rent. Now, what's happened with this Cohen is he worked out that in 4 years' time, it's his mishmar that's serving on the Yom Kippur service when Yovel falls. So what he decided to do is take a benefit of this investment opportunity and has decided to buy it so that when it's his mishmar, he has possession, and therefore, since he's a Kohen, he's entitled to keep it during Yovel Barat, but he doesn't have to share it amongst his colleagues with the mishmar. Why? Because it says if a man consecrates a field from his ancestral heritage to Hashem, and the temple treasurer sold it to the field to another man, it can't be redeemed anymore. So, guys, then when the field goes out of the buyer's possession in Yovel, it'll be holy to Hashem once again. And it says, like a cherem field to the Kohen shall be his ancestral heritage. What does that mean? A cherem field is one that a person declared cherem, which it's not, there's two different definitions of cherem. When somebody gets put into cherem, it's not a good thing. They're booted out of the community. But what it actually means is it's set aside. So you can either set it aside by setting aside somebody out of the community when they've done something naughty and not bury them in a Jewish cemetery and they don't get caught up for an aliyah, or you've got cherem, which means set aside, which is a form of consecration whereby the property is automatically dedicated to the Kohanim. So whoever buys it for that period uses that house, but then at the Yovel year gives it back. And all I'm saying is that he can negotiate the purchase accordingly, because you can't expect him to pay full price if he's only got a certain amount of time. So it's like he owns it, but he only pays pro rata to what he should be. Anyway, this Cohen was looking to have a prospect investment portfolio, and we see that that's not allowed. Why? Because just as a Cohen can't rob property from a convert, make a false oath, and because he knows the person doesn't have any halachic heirs to sue him, he gets to keep it, that's moral. That when he makes this big teshuvah, he doesn't even want to share the property amongst his fellow Kohanim. So what sort of teshuvah is that? He wants the best of everything. And in fact, he's part of the problem, not the solution. So if a Kohen decides to use that investment opportunity, how does he hear about it? Because the temple treasurer says to the Kohen one day, they're busy having a cigarette outside, and obviously not on Shabbos, but they're having a cigarette during the week. And he says to him, like, you know what? got this property I'm trying to sell. So I think I'm going to just declare it at the town council meeting. And the Kohen says, listen, guy hasn't redeemed it yet. Sell it to me. Because he's thinking his mishmar will be on duty on that Yom Kippur that it falls with the Yovel and he gets to keep it. And we learn from that you can't, from the Gezerah Shava to the Kohen, la Kohen. So anything that you do out of, what do you call it, shenanigans, whether it's just like you're not being straight from a business point of view, you're trying to scheme and use the system, and you're not really interested in attaining any spiritual high level, you don't get to keep it. So when do you get to keep that property? Well, if the Kohen inherited an ancestral field from his relative, that during the Yovel year, because he's a Kohen, he can actually get benefit and keep it. He doesn't have to share it with the other Kohanim of his Mishmar. So where's it derived regarding a field that stands to go out to the Kohanim at Yovel? And that one of the Kohanim redeemed, okay? So in other words, an Israelite consecrated a field from his ancestral heritage, and the temple treasurer sold it, so it stands to go to the Kohanim at the Yovel, and the purchaser as a Kohen is a member of the Mishmar that is scheduled to be serving Yom Kippur when the Yovel arrives. That's by Rashi. Okay? From where's it derived that since the Kohen cannot say, since the field goes out to the Kohanim at Yovel, and I'm serving on the Mishmar, I don't have to share it with them because it's already in my possession and it must remain mine. And we say, okay, it's a logical thought that he should be able to say that, because he can say, listen, as a Kohen of the Mishmar that is serving when Yovel arrives, I acquired the share in the consecrated field that was purchased by others. Then regarding a purchased ancestral field of my own, is it not certain that I may keep it? So what he's saying is that it's the same argument as before. Since something that an Israelite brought to atone for, I'm part of that mishmar, and therefore I can keep what never belonged to me. Surely in this case, when I own the item legally, I can keep all of it. He's saying the same thing here. I bought the property, and it's my mishmar serving on duty at the Yovel year and Yom Kippur. Well, it's my property. Why can't I keep all of it? So logically, okay. So we can say it for this reason. If as a Kohen in the Mishmar that is serving when Yovel arrives, I acquire share in the consecrated ancestral field that was purchased by others, then regarding a purchased ancestral field of my own, is it not certain that I may keep it? Therefore, the Torah has to state, like the Cherem field to the Kohen shall be his ancestral heritage. What does this imply? Yes, if the Kohen inherited his own ancestral heritage from a relative, he can keep the share when if he happens to be on the Mishmar during the Yovel year. He doesn't have to share it with the other Kohanim, but not something that he got involved with venture capital in order to shaft his fellow Kohanim of the Mishmar out of it. So the ancestral field of another that he redeemed, it's not his own. Technically, it's not something inherited. How he bought it when from the temple treasurer, because they needed to generate funds until the Yovel year, but it's not his own. So then how's the field treated? Gemara says it leaves the possession of the Kohen who redeemed it. He got his value, that Kohen. He got use out of it for the amount he paid pro rata for the time he had it. And when it comes to the Yovel year, to the Yom Kippur service, it's divided amongst all his brethren, the Kohanim of his Mishmar for that week. By the way, not just for the base, up for the Kohen that served on that day, for the entire week. Okay? So we see that the ancestral field, the law is that the Kohen of the Mishmar, who has it in his possession, cannot keep it as his own, and we learn this from the Gezerah Shava of La Kohen, and it teaches that the same rule applies to the robbed property of a convert who died without heirs. Okay, now, let's just see how long we've got. We've got about 6 minutes. Now, I know that Kevin wants to go watch the rugby. Kev,
No, but I know it's fine. It started. I just want to ask you a question.
I also have a question, but Kevin, you go first.
Yeah.
So the Kohen has this property. He either has a property which was acquired from a a convert who died, didn't have heirs, or it was stolen from a convert. He has it at the time he's about to participate, be part of the mishmar and this ancestral property as well. What's the time frame? Did he acquire at that exact time, or was it already in his possession?
Okay, you asked two questions in one. Let me separate them.
Yeah,
The first
I hope
question
it made
you
sense.
asked is,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter whenever he robbed the property from the convert. Legally, they cannot extract it from him because there's no legal case if there's no plaintiff prosecuting him as the defender. He legally acquired it because he made a false oath. Okay, so if he wants it to teshuva, he can't play double games. He's thinking that I only want to come out and confess and bring the asham on my week's duty to serve in that mishmar, because then as the Kohen, I can get to keep it and I don't have to share it with the meat and the hearts with my fellow Kohanim, because we know that if a Kohen buys an ox, even if it's not his mishmar service, as a Kohen, he can get to keep its meat and its heart. Any further reasons that if an Israelite brings a offering, I'm not entitled to it, and yet if it's my mishmar, I can share it with the other Kohanim of that mishmar. Surely something I own legally, I don't have to share. Because if a Kohen brings his own animal, he doesn't have to share with the other Kohanim. So he's using 2 points of logic here. So it doesn't matter if the time frame is different. The main point here is he magically chooses to confess on the week that it's his mishmar, thinking he's going to keep the proceeds because it's legally his. And as a Kohen, even if it wasn't his duty week for the mishmar, he's entitled to the meat and the hearts. So that's one thing. And the Gezerah Shava of La Kohen comes and brings that when a Kohen plays the same shenanigans, because an Israelite's dedicated a field to the temple and says, I'll redeem it with cash if I get it, and then he doesn't have the extra cash, he says to the temple treasurer, no, it's okay, you can sell it to generate funds for the temple, and he does. And this Kohen has worked out that if he buys this field, because that on the Yovel year, he happens to be part of the Kohanim, that it's the Mishmar for Yom Kippur, and as a Kohen, he can get to keep it in his mind, because, by the way, legally, if it's his ancestral property that he got from his father as a Kohen, and he happens to serve the Mishmar for the Yovel year, he doesn't have to share it with other Kohanim and be saying it's different, because in that case, he's above board. In this case, he was scheming and plotting, and it's not really his field. And that can be put with the same Gezerah Shabbos. It's not like he bought a cow with a clean conscience and he was holy. And he brought it, and then other Kohanim gave him the respect that even though he wasn't on duty, he gets to keep the meat in the house. So it uses a Gezerah Shabbos to say that everything you must do must be clean of intent, because you can't play games with Hashem. You wanted to Shuva, you wanted to Shuva. Can't play games. Okay?
Above board, acquired legally.
Morally, because both are legal. Both are legal. He, in the ancestral field, did but legitimately. He did.
And ethically, I think is the word.
So exactly, morally and ethically. Exactly.
No, ethically,
Yeah, you're right. Morally, ethically are the words.
Because legally doesn't mean it's more ethical.
Correct.
So
we both had a case. In this case, it was both of them were legal. They weren't moral.
Sure.
Okay. What was
Gavin's got a question.
Gavin's question?
So my question